Also ethnographic study on racial bias in the design process. I set out to answer to the questions of how does the awareness of one's racial biases affect the design process, and what are the factors contributing to the occurrence of racial stereotypes when a European designer illustrates African characters. I use the evocative autoethnographic method to deepen understanding on the role of racial and ethnic bias in the design process by going through personal experiences from the perspective of a design student. The case study is illustrating African characters for microstock image banks. I set out to illustrate African characters with more depth and void of racial stereotypes. I sketched concepts and simultaneously criticized them and abandoned any occurring racially stereotyped theme. This, however, proved to be quite limiting and restricting the creativity. So I decided to lower my standards and allow some level of subtle racial bias in the designs. This allowed me to think more freely, and I finally came up with the theme for the illustrations. I used my experiences with a house girl to illustrate a series with the same name. And I based my illustrations on the relationship I had with Araba, a miner who stayed with our family helping with house chores as we lived in Ghana. I set out to illustrate various house chores and then expanded the illustrations to also contain themes of domestic violence, games, leisure time, and worship situations to cover more vast experience of life of a house girl rather than just concentrating on the tasks that she had, to get a more in-depth look at her life. The outcome was somewhat stereotypical in a way that it portrayed the character as a victim, this being a stereotype that African characters many at times fall to when being depicted by Europeans. I allowed this to happen because I thought this theme was so strong and so emotional that it kind of just justified the stereotype. I did struggle with it though. The actual finding of the study is in a nutshell in this graphic. It shows the effects of the designer's awareness of her racial biases during the design process. my emotional motives of pity and envy, and the historical events of slavery, abolitionism, colonialism, and post-colonialism that um, were brought by the Western popular visual culture, and my intergroup relationships were filtered through the awareness of racial biases, so that I was able to identify and reject concepts with racial stereotypes. But this filtering was so effective that it actually interfered with creativity and led to the resolution to postpone critique and to tolerate some level of racial stereotypes. As a conclusion, though being aware of one's racial biases during the design process can interfere with the creative process, it is nevertheless helpful in combating the recycling of racial stereotypes when portraying outgroups. Designers should be mindful of their responsibility as facilitators of social representations.